Hi, guys. Thanks for watching if you're tuning in. Or should I say, hey, you guys, like from the Goonies. Sloth says that if you guys remember. I love the Goonies. It's wonderful. But the funny thing is, so I was in the car talking about how I'd be doing this stream, and Paul was with me, and I just said, "Hey, you guys," and he's like, "What are you quoting? The Electric Company?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? What's the Electric Company?" And he's like, "It's a show, an old show on PBS." And I'm like, "Oh man, you're old." I think that's not from the Electric Company. That's from the Goonies. He's like, "I don't know." And so I played him the scene with Sloth saying, "Hey, you guys," and then he's like, "Look up the Electric Company, though. Look up that show." And sure enough, there's some lady in the open of the show, and they go, "Hey, you guys." So little did I know. Thank goodness Paul's so old because I figured it out. So the Electric Company was a show I guess Sloth watched when he was chained up in the Goonies, and so that's why he said, "Hey, you guys," when they were on the pirate ship at the end. So pretty funny that I didn't have any idea about that connection between the two things. But thanks, Paul, for letting me know that. Really, he just stumbled upon the connection since he knows nothing about the Goonies. So whatever. I'm giving him a lot more credit than I think I should. But thank you guys. If you're just tuning in, we're going to talk about Stranger Things and the Goonies. And this is one of my semi-regular series called Either Or, where I have to choose between two things I flippin' love. So of course that means I do love the Goonies and I do love the show Stranger Things. But in this show, I must choose between the two. I have to pick a favorite. I can love both, which I do, like I just said, but I've got to choose one over the other, either Stranger Things or The Goonies. So we'll get to that at the end, but we'll also talk about our poll results because I put this question out to Twitter, which, entity was better, the movie The Goonies or the show Stranger Things? And yeah, you might be saying, "Kelsey, how can you compare the two? One's a movie and one's a TV show. Why did you choose these two things to compare and contrast and to choose between?" Well, the thing is, the reason I picked these two things together is that both of them, I think, have obviously an 80s feel, since Stranger Things, even though it's a current show, it's set in the 80s, and The Goonies was released in the 80s. So they've got the 80s vibe, both of them. So that already is very similar. And of course, both things have to do with a group of kids. And I think really both Stranger Things and The Goonies are made up of wonderful casts. Like the group of kids for both things, you couldn't get a better group of kids. Really great actors. It doesn't seem phony or forced. And I really love both things. But again, I know I'm comparing two different mediums in a way, but if you really think about it, TV, it's just like a really long movie. It's the same concept, really. And I gotta say, movies today have gone downhill. It's nothing like the great movies of the 80s and the 90s and even back into the 70s. To me, that was some of like the best movies ever released. So many great movies in those decades. Now, I think movies have gone a little downhill. We're focusing more on remakes and, uh, kind of reboots, not just remakes, but like concepts that are being redone with a twist kind of thing, which aren't always bad. They're fun and stuff. And it's entertaining. And we also have a lot of superhero movies, which I do love. But it's just, there's not a lot of fresh ideas like there was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like The Goonies was such a special thing when it was released. A lot of kids grew up loving The Goonies. And it's just today, I feel like TV is the better medium. If we're just talking about in this day and age right now, in this decade, I think TV has far surpassed the quality of movies. So in that way, I'm just kind of thinking like, there's no movie today that I could compare back to The Goonies in style and feel and in really in quality, in my opinion. So let's look at the comments here. Please, guys, if you guys have a preference between Stranger Things or The Goonies, drop it in the comments below and I will read them. Also, if you want me to discuss a certain topic about Stranger Things or Goonies, you can leave it in the comments as well. If you have a very specific question about either one or both, also leave those in the comments. Dave is checking in. Thanks for watching, Dave. We got Brian. How you doing, Brian? Nails and NY says Goonies is better. And I do love the Goonies, but I'm not going to tell you which one I'm choosing yet. Dave says both of these things, the Goonies and Stranger Things, they both have kids going on an adventure, and the adventure is scary. So that is another similarity between the two things. And I also think that each has like a sci-fi type of feel. Really, the Goonies is more adventure than sci-fi, but there is kind of like a magical feeling element to it, but it's more of like whimsy, not like pure magic like Harry Potter magic, but like a whimsical feel more so. I think out of the two, the scarier one would be Stranger Things. Goonies is more, yeah, there's booby traps, but it's not as scary. It's more fun and light. Even though the robbers are pretty hardcore. What is it called? The Fratellis. That's the bad guys. They're a little more extreme, in my opinion. Michael says he's going to get killed in the chat because he's never seen Stranger Things. That's okay, Michael. I'll try not to do any spoilers because I think this is kind of going to be an overarching general discussion about the two and which is better. But if you like the Goonies, Michael, you might really love Stranger Things. Not only is it similar in feel and style, and it's got a lot of nostalgic throwbacks to the 80s, not just to the Goonies, but it's like, if you watch Stranger Things, there's all these cool little Easter eggs, like in Mike's basement. I think it's a basement, whatever that room is that he hangs out in all the time. I think it's a basement. We don't have basements in New Orleans, so I'm like, what is a basement? But Mike has that room that he hangs out with his friends, and there's a Thing poster, John Carpenter's The Thing, on the wall. So I think that's pretty cool. And they've got so many, there's like little elements that call back to movies like E.T. And there's a direct Goonies, I wouldn't call it reference, but I guess homage. They cast Sean Astin, who's the actor who plays Mikey, the main character of the Goonies. They cast Sean Astin, that actor, in Stranger Things. And he played the character of Bob in, what was it, season 2. So I think that's a direct relation right there, which is pretty cool. I loved that they did that. It had a really neat feel to it. And I've watched some extra bonus videos on YouTube, released by Netflix, where they interviewed Sean Astin and said, like, did you have any advice to give to the cast of Stranger Things about being a child actor in like an iconic role like they're basically living now? And he's like, no, not really. My only advice I gave them was really they asked me to tell them stories of adventures on the set and what it was like to film the Goonies, and that's what I told them. And then Sean Astin also kind of described that the feel of Stranger Things being on that set was very similar to the Goonies in that it felt really nostalgic and iconic. And he also said it made him feel really old because they were like reminiscing about all these 80s things. And he's like, man, it's not the 80s anymore. I'm not living, life as an actor in the Goonies. I'm now playing in a show that calls back to the 80s, which of course no longer here. All right. So let's go to the poll results. So like I said, on Twitter, this was a couple of months ago, I put it up to my followers. I said, I want to know, if you had to choose one or the other, Stranger Things or the Goonies, which one would you choose and why? And I told people to feel free to explain why they chose one or the other. We got a total of 411 votes, which is a decent amount of votes. And the winner, the Goonies, won the vote with 53%. And Stranger Things lost. They only got 47% of the vote. So there you go. If you put it up to the people picked the Goonies. C Wrestling UK is in the chat. Thanks for joining us so much. He says, I keep meaning to watch Stranger Things. I just don't have the time to catch up. I think you'd really, really enjoy it because, I don't know, it's just such a cool, nostalgic feel. If you love movies like The Goonies, E.T., even horror movies, because I do feel like Stranger Things, like I said, it's more scary than The Goonies, and it has like a horror type of feel, not just a nostalgic feel or an 80s feel, but more creepy undertones and stuff. Like the music is very eerie. They also reference the Ghostbusters quite a bit, which I flippin' love that they do that. If you guys remember where they all dressed up as Ghostbusters, the kids from Stranger Things. And this is no spoilers, so don't worry, guys, if you haven't seen Stranger Things. Basically, all the kids, they dressed up as one of the Ghostbusters, but of course there was accidentally 2 Venkmans. And one of the kids was like, you can't have 2 Venkmans. What the hell? That was one of my favorite lines of Stranger Things. So we'll get to, I'm going to read some of the reasons why people chose one or the other when I put out that poll on Twitter. But first, let's catch up with people in the chat. More people join us. We got Chibs. Hey, hey Chibs, how you doing? She said, look at this nerd. We got the Bob Culture Podcast. Thanks so much. And he said that this question, choosing between the Goonies and Stranger Things, is nearly impossible to answer. And I think you're right, because this is going to be one of my hardest either-ors yet. Honestly, I really love both things so very much. And I'll give this spoiler away right now. I honestly, as of right now, don't know which I'm choosing, but by the end of the stream, I will force myself to choose, and you guys will see the thought process and my reasoning as it unfolds and happens in real time, because I planned some things about this stream. Of course, I took screen captures of all the Twitter answers, but the thing I didn't plan on was what thing I was going to answer to my own question. So we'll see how it unfolds, whatever. It is what it is. Derek's in the chat joining us. Thanks for joining, Derek. Glad to see you. All right, and let's go to some people's reasons. This is a funny one. It has nothing to do with either Goonies or Stranger Things. At Big Cheese Slice says, Monster Squad. I said, well, Monster Squad is good too. And then someone else weighed in at Mr. Gibson said, yeah, the answer is Monster Squad. I go, Monster Squad is good, but different feel from the Goonies. And I do agree. Obviously, Monster Squad is similar in that it's a movie, basically with the main characters being a group of kids. I mean, heck, if we're just doing movies surrounding kids, you could do Stand By Me, which to me is totally different. Although Stranger Things actually does hearken a little bit in some ways to Stand By Me as well. Like, there's so many great little Easter eggs in Stranger Things. So many, I wouldn't say that they're ripping off any of these 80s movies, but they're definitely paying homage to things from the 80s. And so that's why I think Stranger Things is extra enjoyable if you just love 80s culture and 80s pop culture specifically in general, especially like entertainment, like in terms of movies. And actually, it's a great soundtrack too. Of course, the soundtrack that's written for the show is more like synth and stuff, but I'm talking about they actually pay to use 80s songs in the background of the show. So if you go and pick up the Stranger Things soundtrack, you got to make sure that you're picking up the soundtrack which actually has songs on it versus like the score, because it's two different things. There are two albums that are distinctly different. One's more of synth score type of music that's, obviously laying in while the scenes are playing out, and the other is 80s music that they paid to use the rights to use in the show. So there's two different albums, and I have both, and both are great. Now, I will say that the Stranger Things score soundtrack is a little different to listen to. It's not like you're listening to orchestral music. It's a lot different, just kind of more subdued and creepy. As I said earlier, it goes with the tone of the show, a little eerie. But there is a great song that really reminds me of the score of The Thing, which has like a thumping sound. It goes like doo 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 doo. There's a song on the first season of Stranger Things. The score song is called Breaking and Entering, and that's the song that reminds me a lot of The Thing. If you guys want to compare and contrast, look up Breaking and Entering and then go and play The Thing main theme. All right, so at Original Sin, CYN, said the Goonies is so much better. And it just so happened that I was trying to come up with a GIF to respond to this person who said the Goonies is better than Stranger Things, and I actually found a GIF of Chunk doing the truffle shuffle on top of Falcor from the Never Ending Story, and he's doing the truffle shuffle instead of the kid going, yeah, it's Chunk doing the truffle shuffle. And it's random, but that actually does connect back to Stranger Things, because in the latest season 3 of Stranger Things, we got another 80s reference when one of my favorite characters from Stranger Things, Dustin, sang the theme song from the Never Ending Story, which is a great theme song, by the way. I've got it on my Spotify playlist. But yeah, he literally sings it along with his girlfriend, and it's another little 80s homage that I really enjoyed. So this GIF kind of combines Never Ending Story with Chunk. And Chunk's got to be my favorite character from the Goonies, because he's so funny. Of course, that would be Paul's least favorite, because he just doesn't like Chunk for some reason. All right, so at Dave Pizesky says, I love the Goonies, but Stranger Things is so good. It even references the Goonies and a ton of other 80s pop culture things too. It's so well done, smartly written, and incredibly acted. I absolutely love Stranger Things and would recommend it to anyone. I gotta agree, those are great points, Dave. And I really just I can't really contest anything you said. The thing is, though, any of the things you just said about Stranger Things, almost all of those things can apply to the Goonies because not only was it well written and incredibly acted, just like Stranger Things, but it was also directed by one of the greatest directors, Steven Spielberg, and I think he directed it. I know he at least produced it. I'm pretty sure he directed it. But also just like the cinematic elements, the framing, the cuts, the shots. I really think that's top notch too. Again, it's a classic. You can't overlook it at all. Oh, thank you. In the chat, people are saying that they're multitasking, watching me, and they're watching AEW, and I really appreciate anyone who's doing both. You guys rock for supporting me. It means so much. Derek asks, how does Paul not like Chunk? He's like, amazing. Well, I've got this magnet of Chunk doing the truffle shuffle and staring at it like it would distract Paul, and that's why he doesn't like Chunk, because of my magnet of him doing the truffle shuffle he thinks is annoying and distracting. Okay, Dave, I was wrong. So Richard Donner was the director of the Goonies, but when you look at the Goonies poster, it says Steven Spielberg presents. So Spielberg is involved in the production, but he didn't direct. I wasn't sure on that. Thank you for confirming. Appreciate you. Derek says Chunk is his favorite part of the Goonies doing the truffle shuffle and Sloth saying, hey, you guys, as I said in the beginning of the stream. All right, so let's go to more people choosing which one they like better. At CalWill9, he says Goonies because dot 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 Sloth loved Chunk. And then he used a gif of when Chunk says, "Man, you smell like Fizz Ed." when Sloth picks up Chunk, and obviously Sloth smells pretty bad. Aw. It's not his fault he's flipping chained to a wall. I'm sure he can't shower very easily when he's chained up. That's so sad. So at the JRAD says, I'm all about the Goonies, but I picked Stranger Things solely due to it being a series over a movie. The Goonies is a classic, though. And I think this is an interesting point that we should touch on for a second before we move on. As I said, I do feel like series and TV shows in this day and age are better than any movies coming out. But I tend overall, if we're talking about any decade, I tend to like TV overall as a medium better than movies, which I would have never said that growing up because I wanted to be a film director, I wanted to be in the movies, and I thought for sure the direction I was going was definitely, movies, like that was going to be what my life centered around. But now if you were to ask me, well, one, I am in TV now. I work at a PBS affiliate station. Not very glorious. I would rather work in movies than PBS, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. But I just love the movies, and I would love to work on a TV show. Like if I had a chance to be on the set of Breaking Bad and to work on that show, to say that you worked on like a show like Breaking Bad, Stranger Things, any of the great shows coming out these days, it'd be something that you could really, really be proud of. Not that you couldn't be proud of working on a movie like The Goonies, which is classic, but I just think TV overall is such an interesting medium because it goes further than a movie can in terms of scope, in terms of character examination. Because let's say you really want to know more about Mikey, you want to figure out what happens to Chunk, you want to see what happens as Chunk gets older and he's got to help still take care of Sloth. You can't find any of that out when you're watching The Goonies, which maybe is a good thing because it's a self-contained story. We don't need to go beyond that. But when you're watching a show, you just get to know these characters so much more and more intensely than you would if it was just a 2-hour movie. So I feel like it's kind of easier to get engrossed and extra invested in a TV show over a movie. Whereas movies, I think, even if they're shorter, you still can get invested, but it's more of like a separate type of storytelling, and it's a separate type of investment. It's not as deep, in my opinion, as TV. Chib says Steven Spielberg presents The Goonies, it's like the same as when a movie starts with Quentin Tarantino presents. It's just boosting a movie's marketability, which is very true. But I think Spielberg was pretty involved in the production, if I remember. I've seen bonus features before. I just couldn't remember if he was the actual director or not. Like, for instance, like I know there's this big story. Steven Spielberg was working on, I believe it was Poltergeist, at the same time as E.T. Now, he did not technically direct E.T., I believe. This other guy did, but he was so super involved. Like, let me make sure I'm looking at the right, or maybe it was the opposite way around. I'm going to look it up right now. Oh, it was the opposite way around. Okay, I'm going to look it up, guys. Because I know the story had to do with Poltergeist and E.T., and Steven Spielberg directed one, didn't direct the other. Yeah, okay. So, the director of Poltergeist is a guy named Hooper. And Hooper directed Poltergeist. At the same time, Steven Spielberg was directing E.T., but Steven Spielberg did the story for Poltergeist, and he was super involved in the production, almost too much to where, the actual director was like, what the hell, man? So stuff like that isn't unusual, especially with Spielberg being super involved in any production that he lends his name to. So I have a feeling he was probably pretty involved with the Goonies as well, because even though he's not the director of Poltergeist, he was very much in that production and very much involved. And like I said, there's stories that people were unhappy about how involved he actually was. It was almost to an extreme level. So just because he wasn't the director doesn't mean that he didn't have a huge part in it, All right, so back to our listener and viewer answers and what people said on Twitter about which one they prefer, Stranger Things or The Goonies. We have at OTR King TY, 3 words. Hey, you guys! So he picks The Goonies. Then we've got Jacob at Jacob Von Funkins. The Goonies captures the magic of childhood in a way I don't think anything else quite does. And I do agree with that point in that if you were thinking about the magic of childhood and I used this word earlier, the whimsy of being a kid and still believing in wishes and dreams. And this specifically is addressed in the wishing well scene in The Goonies, where Mouth is talking about his wish, and he threw this coin into the wishing well, but his wish didn't come true, so he's taking the wish back, and he's taking them all back. And it's a really powerful speech, and it's kind of like, I like The Goonies because it touches on the magic of childhood, but at the same time, it's like they're on that line where they're about to have to come to grips with the realization that things don't always work out. The magic of childhood doesn't carry over. They're going to have to grow up. They're going to have to leave their hometown. So to me, The Goonies represents one last big adventure before what they think's going to happen, which is they have to leave the town. But luckily, this adventure works out and they don't have to leave the town. Spoiler alert for The Goonies. But the whole thing is, it's a good in-between type of story where it's almost like one side of the fence of the story is, okay, yeah, magic of childhood, and the other side of the fence is, oh no, what if we have to grow up and move on? So I kind of like that, and I think The Goonies does that type of storytelling better than Stranger Things. Stranger Things is more like, they went from being kids, kind of relating to each other, and it did have a little bit of magic of childhood, but it was more about a sci-fi story, in my opinion, not as much about just being kids together. There is those little great parts of the show where they do interact and they do show their friendship and show their whimsy and childlike wonder. But really, as the show goes into the 2nd season and now most recently the 3rd season, I feel like that whimsy is kind of lost in the story. It's more about telling a sci-fi type of story versus, let's look at these kids being kids. Whereas The Goonies it's a lot more specific. My dog's now chewing on a noisy chew toy. It's a donut. Come on, Jackson. And now he wants to get involved in the stream like he always wants to. He likes The Goonies too. Actually, he's never seen it, but I wonder if he would like it with all the noises in the beginning where they're doing that crazy car chase. That's got to be my favorite part of The Goonies, by the way. I asked people, and I'll read some of their answers a little bit later, but I asked people who their favorite characters were from The Goonies and what their favorite scenes were. And we got a lot of similar answers, but my favorite scene from The Goonies is the opening jail escape and car chase scene, which really, it's awesome because not only does it establish the bad guys, but you get to see every kid character through the chase. You get to see Chunk, you get to see Mikey, you get to see everybody. Really, Mikey's the last stop. It's kind of when the chase ends and Chunk goes over there. And I just think it's a great establishing scene, and it's an exciting open. So everything about that open's awesome, including the music, which to me, the Goonies music, we talked about Stranger Things having great 80s songs, but also a eerie score. I think the Goonies has perfect adventure music. I mean, it's just beautifully scored. Dave ERHODUS says Goonies had great speeches, and he was skeptical about Stranger Things, but wound up really enjoying it. That's great, Dave. As I said, I was actually skeptical of Stranger Things. So the thing is, I watched season 1 like a year after everyone else. Everyone kept telling me, Kelsey, you gotta watch Stranger Things. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. And I was like, nah. I'm sure it's just overhyped like everything. People are gonna say I'm gonna love it, and then I won't like it. I watched like the first season in a night. That's how much I did love it. So yeah, they were right. I was wrong, and I really did end up really enjoying it. So, don't judge, usually they say, a book by its cover, but don't judge a show by its hype, I should say, or you might be skeptical there's too much hype. How could it possibly live up? Just give it a chance. You may or may not enjoy, because some people, I'll read their comments, some people don't really like Stranger Things. I personally love it because it combines all these different elements into one, and it has so many different facets that make it really, really entertaining. But me, I do love horror movies. Not only do I love 80s movies in general, I specifically love 80s horror movies, and I think Stranger Things really pulls a lot of inspiration from those type of movies. So maybe it's because I do love horror so much. Maybe somebody who just likes 80s general pop culture nostalgia, maybe they wouldn't like Stranger Things so much because, like I said, and I've been saying all stream, I think that it skews a little bit to the horror sci-fi realm a little bit more than the family and adventure realm. So if you're kind of comparing. Dave Pozeski says, my favorite part about the Goonies, about how the kids have to grow up, is that dramatic scene where they talk about their. Oh wait, this is about Stranger Things. My favorite part about how the kids have to grow up is that the dramatic scene where they talk about their D&D club and how it's not the same anymore. That's a great point, Dave. That is one of the parts where, like I was talking about a few minutes ago, Goonies, these kids had to struggle with growing up a little bit. This is an instance in Stranger Things where the kids also have to struggle with growing up. I think we saw that a lot in season 3 of Stranger Things, where the group of kids just aren't the same anymore. And the scene Dave is referencing is Will just doesn't feel connected to the rest of the group as much anymore. Everyone else has girlfriends. He doesn't. The, D&D club doesn't feel the same. So in that instance, you could see them transitioning from childhood to more like preteen adulthood. And the thing about Stranger Things is that's happening really fast in the show because the actors are aging. So as the actors age, you inevitably have to kind of skew up your storytelling, kind of make it more mature, make their stories more mature a bit, so that they're not kids anymore. You can't really write them as kids anymore. They've got a little bit more multifaceted emotions and stuff. And Nails and Y said, have you seen or talked about the new trailer yet for Stranger Things? No, I have not, but I'll touch on it now. I don't want to give away specific spoilers, but I am amazed at what they revealed in the Stranger Things 4 trailer. I cannot believe they showed who they showed in that trailer. I thought that would be a big surprise, that we would all be speculating, oh, is he or is he not around? But they just show it? Like, I can't believe they showed it. So my friend Dave Pozeski, who's in the chat right now, he brought up a good point, though. He said, if they're revealing this in the trailer, there's got to be some bigger surprises ahead. There's got to be more in store that's even crazier than letting that go in the trailer. So I have faith that there'll be more that unfolds that'll be surprising. I'm just surprised they went there in the trailer. Nails and NY said, I'm amazed they had him on the thumbnail and they showed him. Yeah, I know. It surprises me because I just thought that would be like such a good thing to keep hidden. But maybe they thought that they couldn't keep it hidden, so they're like, let's just reveal it. I don't know the thinking behind that, but if it were me, I would probably keep that a secret. But that's why I tended to agree with Good Guy Dave when he says that there's probably going to be a bigger surprise ahead ahead of this. I mean, after that. I cannot talk. Chibs, let's see. Chip says, I can't believe they showed Santa hugging the Easter Bunny. Wink, wink. Yeah, I don't like to give anything away, so I'm not going to specifically say who they showed. But if you watch Stranger Things, you know who they showed. I mean, there's only one person that could be a surprise. Chib says, you know, cashing in on nostalgia when it comes to having like this whole 80s is cool trend, and some shows are kind of playing into that trend right now. And as Chib says, she thinks it's like cashing in on nostalgia. The funny thing is, I actually think 90s nostalgia is hotter right now, hotter whatever, is more popular right now than 80s nostalgia. Even though yes, we see it in Stranger Things, I feel like 90s nostalgia is all around us. If you watch like things from Nickelodeon being rebooted, or remade, things from Disney being remade. Like, they can't, for some reason, they're doing live action versions of every Disney movie. They can't just let the animated versions stand on their own. What the heck? Again, they're kind of cashing in on the nostalgia we all are feeling right now. And I don't fault shows and movies for doing that in a way, because sometimes it's fun and good. Like, for instance, we're getting another Bill and Ted. That in itself is cashing in on nostalgia, and that's more 80s nostalgia than 90s. But yeah, it's happening across all forms of visual media, TV and movies. But I think, like I said, some shows and movies go too far and they're just doing it just to do it, where I think others do it right. Where Stranger Things, I feel like they're not ripping off the 80s, or I don't think they're necessarily cashing in on the coolness of the 80s nostalgia. I feel like they're literally paying homage to things that the creators loved from the 80s, and things that we as audience members love about the 80s. So I think it's kind of works as a win-win situation for them. They get to pay homage to these great, awesome old school movies and songs, and the cultures of other decades. But at the same time, it works in their favor because that's kind of very popular right now and people eat it up. So like I said, win-win. Oh, this is interesting. Nails and NY says the Goonies, the house is still visited to this day. It's such a cult favorite. You can find so many YouTube videos of people visiting it. It's one of the greats. I've never looked up where the house is, and I didn't know that the house from the Goonies is still around. But that would be a lot of fun to go and see the house. Where they filmed and everything, like some exteriors, because I'm sure they had a set for a lot of the inside stuff, like the attic and stuff like that. I also really love the attic scene. If we're talking about the Goonies right now, the attic scene where they all of a sudden stumble upon this map, this treasure map. And I love how the music changes from kind of like light to really almost. This is where the Goonies music gets a little eerie. And it's one of the only places that it gets kind of like, not foreboding, but it's like, the tone lowers a little bit. And it's the most the music gets to be in Stranger Things ish. Most of the rest of the movie is like do 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 do. But yeah, there's a few instances where the music gets darker, and the attic scene is one of them. All right, so let's go back to the listener comments, and I'll try to keep up with you guys' comments too, but I do want to read more Twitter stuff. Robbie at Braves Fan for Life 8 says, he just posted a gif of which one he chose. He said, Goonies never say die. It's a gif of Mikey saying that in the wishing well. At I'm sorry, I can't even read this. At SCWP514, he's picking the Goonies. Watched it with my sister literally every rainy weekend as a kid. Stranger Things was so good season 1, but he feels they dropped the ball in season 2 with the tedious 11 looking for her sister plot and just waiting around for 11 to save the day again. But he believes that season 3 was a great return to form. See, actually, I disliked season 3 the most because in Stranger Things season 3, the kids are growing up really fast. They're a lot older. The charm of them being like small and little and cute is kind of gone, and some of their innocence is gone too. But the story is interesting in a way, but I think some of the story points were a little too convenient. Season 2, I know people criticize the sister thing and the aspect where Eleven wasn't around that much, but as in she wasn't around with the gang as much. But I think season 2 was interesting, some other parts that played out, whereas season 3, I'm like, I really like some elements of it, but at the same time, I don't know, it's really hard to beat season 1 for both season 2 and 3. It's like season 1 set the bar so high. I think, as Mark was saying in that comment I just read, I think season 1's the strongest of all of the seasons so far. We got to see what they're going to play out with season 4. It's going to be interesting with all that stuff happening with 11. You know, she's struggling. She's not her old self. She can't do the things she did before. So what's going to happen with that? I'm sure she's going to regain what she could do, but how is that going to happen? Let's go to the comments here. HBK367 says, never saw the Goonies all the way through until I was in high school. I'd always tune in the middle and never see how the journey began. Well, I love the beginning, so I'm glad you finally eventually saw the beginning and the whole thing, because I think that the beginning, and I like the end too, especially the very end when it's like a feel-good ending. But the middle parts are great as well. I'm just saying the whole movie is great now. By the time I'm done with this answer, I'm saying the beginning's great, the end's great, the middle's great. But I think the best part of the movie to me is the beginning and the way it all plays out. All right, guys, I want to thank everyone who's tuning in right now to join me. We're talking Stranger Things and Goonies and which one I would choose over the other. But before we get to my choice, if you're just joining us, I'm reading some people's choices between the two and why they chose one over the other. So we just had a couple of answers. It seems that the Goonies has the kind of leg up on Stranger Things. A lot more people talking about how much they love the Goonies, why it's better in their eyes than Stranger Things. And if you missed the beginning of the stream, I revealed that the poll results, where I pitted the two against each other and asked my Twitter followers to choose one over the other, we know that the poll result was the Goonies won with 53%, whereas Stranger Things only got 47%. So I still think it was a lot closer than I thought. I thought, I honestly thought the Goonies would run away with it just because of the nostalgia factor. But yeah, it was really close, actually. My good friend at Take the Bump Pod said, I love the Goonies, but it's Stranger Things for me. It appeals to not only my love of the 80s and 80s movies like Goonies, but also to my love of the horror genre. To be honest, Stranger Things kind of is Goonies with more monsters. Like I said, I kind of referenced this in the beginning of the stream. I think that I like Stranger Things so much because I do love horror movies a lot, especially old 80s horror movies. So that's what Take the Bump is saying, that not only does Stranger Things has like a Goonies feel, but it's got like horror elements too, way more than Goonies has. Goonies more just like a fun adventure. There's danger, but there's not monsters per se. And there's really not sci-fi at all. Jake Wrestle News said, I would have to say Goonies. I've only watched a bit of Stranger Things, and it didn't make me want to watch it. Oh, that's a shame, because I really like both, and I think Stranger Things, especially the first season, has a ton to offer. But I understand, if it's not your jam, maybe you like, feel-good adventure movies more than like horror type of sci-fi types of entertainment. There's kids on TikTok, they lip sync Mikey's "It's Our Time Down Here" speech. I love that speech. But it's our time down here. I don't know the whole thing, but that's one of my favorite speeches of the whole movie. I'll get to some people's favorite scenes, and a lot of people said they loved the wishing well scene, but they liked Mouth's part of the wishing well scene where he talked about taking his wish back and taking all the wishes back because it didn't come true. I like Mikey's speech where he talks about not going back up, not leaving, not going up the the bucket, back up to society with that bad guy. I forgot his name. Is it Chad? I can't even remember the guy's name, but I don't know. He's a douchebag. I don't like that guy. I'm glad that Andy stayed with Brand and didn't go back up there because he's bad news. But anyway, I really liked Mikey trying to convince the gang to stay down there and have one last adventure, and it's their time down there. Such a great speech. Wonderful part of the movie. Really, really heartfelt. And that's the thing. The thing about Goonies, I feel, has more of a heartfelt type of feel than Stranger Things does. Now, there is some really, there's some good scenes in Stranger Things that do get you in the feels. Like, I love Eleven and Mike and their relationship. And I love all the guys in Stranger Things. the young guys, their relationships with each other, their friendship is very strong and very heartfelt in different ways. But again, like Goonies, it kind of takes it to another level, a cheesier level, but in a good way, if that makes sense. Because there are cheesy parts of the Goonies, especially at the end where they're all hugging and stuff. But I like that stuff. You know, there's not enough of that today. It's all like serious and like you can't say this, you can't do that. Oh, we hate this and we hate that and blah blah blah. And everyone's arguing. But the Goonies, you put it on, you watch it, and you're like, man, this makes me feel good and happy and stuff. And that's what I think makes Goonies so special. It kind of speaks to the kid in all of us, I think. And I like how when I was reading comments earlier about why people like one over the other, somebody said that they always watched it on a rainy weekend. Goonies is literally made for a rainy weekend because in the movie it's like so drenched when they're riding their bikes. It just looks like it's perfect to go on an adventure on a rainy day. That's what they're doing. So why wouldn't you watch it on a rainy weekend or on a rainy day? I want to thank you guys who are just joining. You guys rock. Jake, Wrestle News, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. He says he's going to follow me. Thank you, Jake. I really, really appreciate that. I could use every follow I could get. And you rock. All right, so let's go into more answers. And this is a funny thing. So Take the Bump Pod chose Stranger Things over the Goonies, but here's a fun fact. Take the Bump says his mom went into labor at the theater watching the Goonies on its opening night, and he was born at 1:32 the next morning. That's pretty funny. So although he picked Stranger Things over the Goonies holds a special place, not only in his heart, but obviously his life, since he was born right after his mom was watching the Goonies at the theater. That's pretty funny. At Real FN Game, Stranger Things, it's just too good to deny. So that's one of our first Stranger Things choices. Take the Bump Pod and then Nathan, they both picked Stranger Things. Before, all the other answers I've been reading have been picking the Goonies. So then we got Derek at Derek Stark. He says, I just think you learned so much more from the Goonies, in my opinion. And again, I think that speaks to more of a heartfelt type of message that the Goonies has about working together, not giving up, wanting to believe in wishes and dreams. And even though Mouth in that speech in the wishing well kind of questions dreams and wishes coming true, they stick with the dream a little bit longer. They don't go out of the wishing well. They continue on in their journey. Even though they were tempted to leave and to give up, they didn't. And they continued investing in the dream, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think there is a lot to learn from the Goonies. It's definitely kind of a more moral story in terms of not only just moral, but also coming of age story more than Stranger Things is, in my opinion. We've got a lot of people saying stuff in the chat real quick. Let me just Dave RHODUS says the most emotional part of Stranger Things for me is Will putting away his D&D books and saying there won't be another party. And again, that kind of harkens to what Good Guy Dave was saying about how the D&D party had completely changed and the group of friends they had to find another way of relating to each other because they were just all evolving and becoming different. And that was really powerful. Both Daves kind of said the same thing. I agree with that scene and those parts of Stranger Things were powerful. Nails and NY said, I'm British and moved to USA when I saw kids on bikes. I always think of the Goonies or Stand By Me. Those kids are going on an adventure. That's true. Kids on bikes. It is very much reminiscent of the Goonies. Like whenever you see anybody on a bike, like they must be going somewhere, doing some kind of adventure. And whenever you as a kid, if you liked the Goonies as a kid, if you were on a bike, you were like, let me try to go on an adventure, but it would never be as epic of an adventure as the Goonies had. I wish you could have an adventure that epic in real life. That'd be pretty cool. If you just found some hidden treasure, heck, I'd be up for that, if that could possibly happen. HBK367, have you seen Cyndi Lauper's Good Enough for the Goonies music video that is played in the background as the kids go on their journey? Yes, and I love that, and I love that that's playing in the background as they're riding away, and you could see Brand like tied up, but you could hear the music playing. That's such a great scene, and the music really fits perfectly with what's going on in that, that whole unfolding of the scene. We've got at Strange Stomp. I don't remember Stranger Things getting away with saying One-Eyed Willie over and over again. So I guess he's picking the Goonies because they do say One-Eyed Willie like a ton. That one's for Willie. No, don't take that. That treasure's for Willie. I don't remember if he says One-Eyed Willie right there, but he does say it a lot, especially Mikey. He says it all the time in the movie. At TD_LUV, Truffle Shuffle, so he's picking the Goonies, of course, and he says it was his favorite movie as a young boy. At Dr. KZVOSKY66, tough choice, but the Goonies all day. I mean, Stranger Things is in part a Goonies knockoff anyway. Plus, you add a Cyndi Lauper tie-in, a mafia true crime storyline, and the raunchy adult / Rogan-esque humor of the Goonies. It was way ahead of its time in so many ways. That's some great points there because it does have some kind of like under the table humor with the statue of David and like the basically them knocking off the penis, and then Mikey's like, it's my mom's favorite part. And there's so many little things like that in the Goonies. That's ridiculous. But it really was a great movie in terms of the script was so well done, so well written. It was like a movie that kids could enjoy, but adults would like too. I say that though, so my dad loved the Goonies and would watch it with me as a kid. I love the Goonies obviously as a kid and now as an adult. But my dad didn't watch Stranger Things at first. I watched it and then I recommended it to him and I said, Dad, you'll love it. You like the Goonies, you like all these things, you like Ghostbusters, and he likes horror movies. And I was like, you got to watch Stranger Things. And at first he was like kind of hesitant and then he really got into it. So I think although it's something that speaks to kids, I think it can speak to adults too. Both things, both the Goonies and Stranger Things. Since my dad, he liked both as an adult. So, and obviously he never saw Stranger Things as a kid, but I'm sure if he was younger, he would have still liked it. Nails and NY says maybe we love Stranger Things because we love the Goonies. That could be like I said, there are many factors that Stranger Things kind of plays off of that are nostalgic that I think works in its favor. But I don't think it's just the Goonies. I think it's a lot of different things. And I think even if you took all the nostalgia away, Stranger Things has a good story, period. So I think people would have liked Stranger Things regardless if it had the same story but was set today, like if it had no nostalgia. But I think people are obsessed about Stranger Things because of the nostalgia. So I think it would have been a great show either way, but I don't think it would have been as much of a cult classic as it is now because of all the nostalgia. HBK367, a lot of pro wrestlers are also in the Cyndi Lauper video that was used in the Goonies. And yeah, that makes sense because, Cyndi Lauper was so involved with, back then WWF. So, and, Lou Albano, and she was really involved, obviously, in early WrestleMania. So it makes sense that they would have had wrestlers in the video. All right, we've got the chubby behemoth was at AEW All Out. He says Stranger Things, and that's more because there's so much more available to watch. You can't go wrong, though, with either choice. And that's true, too. And as we were talking about earlier about which medium is better, movies or TV shows, it's easy to invest in characters in a TV show because you get to know them for sometimes years and years. So you get extra invested in those characters versus a movie. You're only with those characters for like 2 hours. But if you're talking about the Goonies, this is a movie that's been around for decades that people watch over and over again their entire life. So you could argue, yeah, you're only with these characters for 2 hours, but at the same time, you're almost with them your whole life if you keep watching it over and over again throughout your lifetime. So it can really work either way in terms of being invested. You can kind of get invested in either. At IMJ Walker, I hate the Goonies, Monster Squad, or GTFO. No! That's blasphemy, man. I like the Monster Squad a lot. Wolfman's got nards. He does. But at the same time, it's like, it's not better than the Goonies, 1. 2, how could you hate the Goonies? Oh my god, it's so nostalgic and great. And obviously, I wasn't calling it nostalgic when I watched it as a kid, because I didn't even really know anything about the 80s. I just knew it was a good movie. So I liked it even before, I considered it nostalgic. Sorry for the cough. Antonio at Wrestling More 19. Goonies is a classic. Randy Fortuno at Undead Randy. He posts a gif of Chunk doing the truffle shuffle. Bob at Bob MADIA1. It's more of an homage to the 80s, where the Goonies is the 80s. So what Bob is saying here is that the Stranger Things has all these homages to the 80s. Goonies is the 80s. Like, it defines the 80s. It's a part of the 80s. That's a good point there, but it doesn't mean that really one's better than the other just because of that. But I understand that point. Andy at Big and YEATON. Goonies only because I haven't gotten around to binge watching Stranger Things yet. Well, I guess if you haven't seen one or the others, you have to pick Goonies if you've only seen that. At the SCOTTSTER21, The Goonies is the real deal. Stranger Things is a facsimile. Oh my god, I can't do it. We'll just skip over that. I can say it, but I'm all tongue twisted. The Goonies is a parody of it in a way, or like a playoff of it, and of a raft of other not so subtle influences, largely because of the creators paying homage to those things. I understand, like, basically what Scott is saying is that Stranger Things just plays off all these nostalgic things, which is this whole conversation we've been having this whole stream is Stranger Things popular only because of the nostalgic elements? And as I said a few minutes ago, I don't think so. I think it plays off of a good story. I think that's a large part of why it's such a good show, not just the nostalgia. At JohnZilla99, Goonies can't be replaced in the heart of an 80s kids. Hands down winner for me. Makes sense. At BFRLUCHACHRIS, Goonies forever. City of Yang at VOGEA. I can't speak. I can't read. At VOGEAZ. Goonies, seriously? It's a cult movie, yes, but come on, man. So he's definitely picking Goonies. At Chris DYAS81, love Stranger Things. Here we go, more Stranger Things love. At DLV_pro, Goonies is the 80s, and Stranger Things only mimics the 80s. Again, we're seeing these similar answers about Stranger Things only playing off of nostalgia, only mimicking things from the 80s. I don't think so. I just think it's paying homage. It's not mimicking. I don't think it's trying to be the 80s. I just think, Scott said a few answers ago, the creators love the 80s, so they're just putting in stuff that they love. At FREW05PW, The Goonies was my childhood, Stranger Things is great, and season 3 really hit. I'd have to go with Stranger Things. So it seems like it was a tough choice for him, but he still chose Stranger Things. At World of Wrestling, always Goonies. Stranger Things is highly overrated. I disagree with the overrated part because I really think Stranger Things is a good show. All right. So I asked people about Stranger Things. I said, who's your favorite character from Stranger Things and why? Favorite line, favorite scene? And I told people I would discuss all this on the show, this stream right now. Tim at Tim SPULAK said, my GIF was the correct answer, and I put a GIF of Dustin, of course. He's such a cute kid, and he feels like the most well-rounded character. I do really love Dustin. Paul, that's his least favorite character, of course. I don't know why. I think he's really fun and funny, and I think he's so cute with his little voice and, the way he talks. And I loved when he sang the Never Ending Story song. So that was the best part of season 3 for me. Our friend Chibs, who is just in the chat at Chibi Halloween, her favorite character is Hopper because who doesn't love a drinking, smoking, cynical bastard? Her favorite line, you shouldn't like things because people tell you you're supposed to. And of course, it's when Will and his brother are talking in his room. And her favorite scene is when Elle started to levitate by closing the portal. I believe that's in season 2 at the very end, epic finale. And then she likes season 1 the most because it had the best mix of mystery and horror. And I do agree with you there, Chibs, because I think that season 1 had a great balance. And every other season's been good, but it just didn't have as good of a balance between the different elements of story and genre feel. Larry at Larry B3960. Mike's dad is my favorite character. Mike's dad is so subtly great and funny. So I agree with you that Mike's dad is hilarious. He just can't be bothered with anything. How he just like kind of waves off stuff and is really oblivious to things going on in his house, I think is hilarious in itself. And Nails and Y is saying they love Dustin and his teeth. She's our friend and she's crazy. That's a great line. It's one of my favorite quotes from Stranger Things. Of course, friends don't lie is one of my favorite quotes from Stranger Things. I love everything with Elle and Agos, I think is really great. And speaking of Agos, Good Guy Dave said that he loved the scene with her with the Agos coming out of the grocery store where she kind of caused chaos. And Good Guy Dave also said Stranger Things technically had a Goonies reference with Sean Astin, but if they went all out like they did with the Never Ending Story song, what would you like to see happen in Stranger Things that's kind of like taking reference from the Goonies? I'd love to see the Stranger Things kids go almost on like they've gone on like a hunt where they're like looking for a place, like they were looking for where Elle came from and where Will could be, but they've never gone on like a treasure hunt type of a thing. They did ride on bikes just like the Goonies, so I just think that they could do more adventures on bikes, continue to do that. But like now that they're getting older, it really seems like they can't use their bikes as much. It doesn't really fit anymore with their age. But we'll see how season 4 is going to play out. I think it is going to have inevitably a mystery type of feel, an adventure type of feel, because the whole Hopper thing, they're going to have to figure out what's going on. And I just think that will just lend itself to kind of like, oh, we've got to follow this trail, we've got to solve this mystery, kind of like a Goonies feel in and of itself, just by what's got to unfold in season 4. Other people want me to talk about which 80s songs I think that they're going to pay homage to in season 4 of Stranger Things. I don't know, because there's so many great 80s songs that they could kind of throw in there. I don't think we're going to get another sing-along, even though that would be great. And obviously Dustin and his girlfriend doing the Never Ending Story sing-along was so popular, and it really went over really well. I just don't think that they could replicate that scene, and if they did, it would feel a little forced, even if it was a different song. It's just like the Never Ending Story song and sing-along worked. I don't want them to try to repeat it and try too hard. Obviously, I want them to still keep using 80s songs in the background, but I don't necessarily want to see them do another sing-along. The first one was just too perfect. There's no need. Then my friend at Deej Kirkby wanted to know what actors would I cast in a remake of the Goonies? I don't know. That's like the hardest question ever. I don't really want to recast a remake. I'd rather them finally do Goonies 2, which they've been promising forever, but never delivering on. We've been hearing forever Sean Astin and people talking about the idea of the Goonies 2, where they're like adults and something happens and maybe they've got kids now and they can go on an adventure. I don't know how that would play out, but if these same people were involved and good writers were involved, then I wouldn't have a problem with it. It would probably be a little hokey and corny, but I'd rather see that than a straight up remake with new kids, just because to me that's lazy. Why remake something that's perfect? I'd rather see them build on it and do something new, but it's still in the universe type of thing. At least that's just my preference. I think Dave has a great point here in the comments. He's saying Stranger Things gets a bad reputation because it has all the nostalgia, which to be fair isn't a bad thing to begin with. But if people gave it a chance, though, they'd see that Stranger Things goes deeper than just the nostalgia. And he's 100% right. And I agree with him 1,000%, because it really is a great story, period. And if you like sci-fi or horror, take out all the nostalgia. It has an interesting plot. You will get invested in the mystery, in solving what's going on and figuring it out. It's got great actors. That's the thing. The actors really move it forward. They couldn't have picked a better group of kids. They really couldn't have. Elle is amazing. And the actress, Millie Bobby Brown, I love her. She's so sweet and adorable. All the kids from Stranger Things are amazing. I watch a whole bunch of videos of them on talk shows, and it's so cool because they really seem like they're friends in real life. And I think that comes across when they're acting in the show, is that they all obviously have an off-screen connection that comes across on screen. It's kind of like wrestling. You can tell when two guys or two gals in the ring have a chemistry. It just comes across so naturally in a match. And most of the time, the people who are real life friends, they have the best matches together in the ring against each other. Or if they're tagging together, they'll have great matches against other people. The thing is, it all comes from the chemistry they have off, out of the ring, off camera. When they go in the ring, that chemistry comes across. Same thing with actors. They kind of gel outside, away from the cameras. Then when they get in their scenes and into character, I think they have a deeper connection with each other, with the scene, with the material. All that comes across. This is a great question. Daver Hodis says, which group of kids are better actors, the Goonies kids or Stranger Things kids? Oh my God. I gotta say, I honestly think the Stranger Things kids are better actors because they're more serious and they're playing more serious roles. There are serious parts of the Goonies, like, the wishing well, but there's a lot of comedy in the Goonies. And I just think that overall, every kid in Stranger Things holds their own in terms of acting ability. So if I had to choose one group over the other in terms of acting quality, I gotta say Stranger Things. I just think they're really well rounded. You can't tell that they're acting, whereas in some parts of Goonies, and it doesn't bother me because I love the movie, but you can almost tell that they're acting. I mean, it doesn't take me out of the movie. It doesn't mess with my suspension of disbelief because they're still good actors and I still believe what they're saying. But yeah, there's some lines that don't seem as authentic to kids, and you can almost feel that when you're watching Goonies a little bit more than Stranger Things. And Dave does make a good point. Like Goonies, the acting's it's more heightened because it's a movie versus a show. It can be more subtle. It has a longer to play out. Whereas the actors, they only have a 2-hour window to play these roles. So yeah, that makes sense too. The actors in Stranger Things kind of have a leg up. They get to know their characters over such a longer period of time and much more material than like a 2-hour movie. And finally, let's talk about some things from the Goonies. I asked people their favorite parts and lines from the Goonies. Foul at foul_original said, for so many years as a kid, I did the truffle shuffle during swimming practice, all thanks to Chunk. So he loves Chunk and he loves the truffle shuffle scene. At A_J01, my favorite character from the Goonies has to be Mouth, the smart mouth kid you wanted to slap, but he meant well. The bit where he's misinterpreting the instructions to the house cleaner is great. And yeah, I always laugh at that part. And so obviously he's misinterpreting her Spanish, but then he's speaking really good Spanish in the attic when he's reading the map. And I like that kind of two-toneness of his character. I think it's really cool. Then we've got at Deej Kirkby. His favorite quote, I can't tell if it's an A sharp or a B flat. If you hit the wrong note, we'll all be flat. And that's a great scene, of course, when they're trying to play the piano of bones and they're trying to get around that booby trap. And Deej says that his favorite character is Chunk, obviously. Baby Ruth? Of course, that's Sloth, but, when I think of Sloth and Chunk, you got to think of them together. It's almost like they're twofold. I can't think of Sloth without thinking of Chunk. Tongue-tied. All right, good guy Dave at Dave Pizeski says, I haven't watched the Goonies in a while. Now, while the Truffle Shuffle influenced my childhood deeply, the wishing well scene is the most memorable because it's all about wishes and dreams. Mouth's line in that scene is great. He was my favorite because his personality was awesome. And I do think Mouth is a cool character. He kind of gets on your nerves a little bit, but in a believable way. He's really mouthy, obviously, which really fits with his nickname in the movie. I do think he's a great character. I think Corey really played him very well, of course. At Last Bone Stand said, my favorite character has to be Chunk. The scene where he is being interrogated with his hand over the blender is my favorite scene in the entire movie. That is a wonderful scene. And then when he cries about doing the barfing or fake barfing over the balcony, oh my God, that makes me laugh every time. He just gets so upset. At Brian_speaks, His favorite character is Mouth. He loves everything he says throughout the movie, but his speech in the wishing well is classic. Very great answers from all of my Twitter followers. Really loved all of their input, and I loved all of you guys' input in the comments as well. And now I gotta say, it's time for my choice. I gotta choose between the Goonies or Stranger Things. Throughout the stream, I liked going through everyone else's answers because I kind of gave my 2 cents on things on both sides of the coin. I kind of said the pros and cons of both mediums or pieces of art, I should say. I gave the pros and cons of both. And I'm glad I did that because it kind of makes the choice a little easier to make in my head. Now, I gotta say, while most people chose the Goonies, and the Goonies will always hold a special place in my heart, I really gotta choose Stranger Things because the first season captured me so heavily, and I had not had a favorite show in a long time when I first discovered Stranger Things. In fact, I was in what they call a show hole. When you're all like bummed out, you just finish a show, you can't figure out what else to watch, and you're like, no, I can't figure it out. And again, I was skeptical to watch it, but as soon as I invested in it, I really bought in. And I just love the first season. And even season 2 and 3, I really enjoyed too. So I gotta say, the Goonies will always hold an extra special place in my heart. And this was not an easy choice. It wasn't like I knew I was gonna pick Stranger Things off the bat. I really struggled with this, and I almost picked the Goonies because Stranger Things isn't complete yet. It's kind of almost, I feel like a little bit like I'm being unfair picking Stranger Things because we don't know the complete story. So it's hard to judge the whole thing as an overarching, beginning to end thing. But if I just take season 1, which is almost like a standalone, that's the cool thing because I don't know if they knew right away that Stranger Things was going to continue. Yeah, the final episode of season 1 of Stranger Things had a little tease with Will, the thing that comes out in the sink. That obviously was a little tease like, oh God, what's going to happen? But they could have technically just ended it there, and it could have been a standalone. So if we just compare season 1 of Stranger Things to Goonies and almost do it like that, I think I feel okay choosing Stranger Things. Because to me, season 1 of Stranger Things was one of the most perfect things I'd ever seen. I really love that show and that season in particular, and I do feel like it's fair to pick it, but I do feel a little guilty, I'll say. I'll admit. It's a little weird not choosing the Goonies since I grew up loving it so much. If I had to guess how many times I've seen it, and it'd be interesting to ask my followers how many times they think they've watched it, I've got to have seen it at least 20 times, maybe more. So it obviously is very dear to me and something that I've always loved, especially because, I enjoyed it with my dad. But yeah, if I really was pressed up against a wall, which is what this show is supposed to do, it's supposed to force me to choose between 2 things I love, force me to make impossible choices. And although this choice is basically impossible, I somehow put my foot down Stranger Things. So hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing the different debates from people, which ones they liked over the other, which thing they liked better, and why. Hopefully you're not too upset with my answer if you love the Goonies versus Stranger Things. And hopefully, if some of you guys haven't seen Stranger Things, I didn't really give away any spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, I do recommend it because I think a lot of people who like, fun mystery type of stories, sci-fi horror, or just plain old nostalgia, all that stuff is in Stranger Things. So if you like any of that, one thing, like one of those things or all of those things, you can find it in Stranger Things. So give it a chance. Yeah, some people might think it's overhyped, but I think the hype is warranted, personally, I think. So I want to thank you guys for sticking with me. I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing your thoughts and opinions, as I always do. I got some cool things coming up in the future, and I just want to remind you guys to please leave a like. That would help me out a lot. To share the video with your friends who might love Stranger Things or the Goonies or both. And also, to just spread the word about my channel. And if you're not already subscribed, please do me a favor and subscribe. That would really mean a ton to me. And if you're already subscribed, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I appreciate you guys watching overall, regardless. But I got a lot of exciting things coming up. I'm going to be talking about Harry Potter and wrestling. You might say, what do those things have to do with each other? Well, basically, I'll be talking about which wrestlers I think could be Death Eaters and which wrestlers I think could fight alongside Harry as a part of Dumbledore's army and why. Like, I'm not just picking random people with no rhyme or reason. There'll be a reason. And I'll put the question out to you guys as well, and I'll read your basically choices of wrestlers who would be a Death Eater and who would help Dumbledore's army in the fight against good and evil in Harry Potter in that universe. That's kind of a fun little mix of different things, but I thought it'd be kind of neat to do something like that because I love mixing pop culture with wrestling. So that'll be very soon. And also, the thing I'm most excited about, the thing that's been 8 months in the making, 8 months, like a very long time. A long time ago, I put out this crazy set of polls, almost like a bracket of 90s kids movies. And I basically set out to find what people thought was the ultimate 90s kid movie, the best 90s kid movie. And if you can't think of what would be a 90s kid movie, think of movies like Heavyweights, Free Willy, Mighty Ducks. You've got a Goofy movie, Homeward Bound, all kinds of stuff. I mean, really, the list goes on and on and on. Home Alone's one of them. So many different great movies. Blank Check is one of them too. So we're going to talk about which is my favorite 90s kid movie. I'm going to review a couple of specific 90s kids movies, and then we're going to reveal the poll results, which I think I started out with, was it 64 movies? I had this whole crazy scientific bracket. I put movies against each other 4 at a time, and the winners of the polls all went against each other, and it ended up with one poll, 4 final movies, and then we got one finalist, one winner. And we'll reveal all of that when I get to my 90s kids movie stream. And it's going to be a lot of fun because not only are we going to talk about opinions and reviews of certain 90s kids movies, we're also going to talk about some trivia, some random facts about these kids movies. Like, there's some really funny things I learned about, like the first Kid. I rewatched that a couple of months ago. God, is it bad? It's so bad, it's good. It's the one with Sinbad in it. Oh my God, it's so ridiculous. Anyway, and Blank Check. I've got this whole article that I found about this girl rewatching Blank Check and all the things that are wrong with it. I'm also going to rewatch Blank Check because although there is a lot of disturbing things about the movie, it is great. We'll talk about a Goofy movie. We'll talk about so many nostalgic great movies. Of course, Heavyweights, you can't not mention that. There's so many more that I'm not even mentioning, but I'm not going to review all of them. Of course, that stream would be like 7 hours long. We're just going to vaguely talk about the best 90s kids movies, and like I said, some trivia, and so surprising, I'm going to share the ratings, the official ratings on like Rotten Tomatoes and other sites that basically give movies either like a star rating or a percentage rating, and all of that will actually surprise you what the ratings actually are. So stay tuned to that because I'm super excited. It's going to be at least another 2 weeks because I've got more movies to kind of catch up on. I got more planning to do, but I plan on doing that stream with graphics. So please, guys, if you enjoyed this stream, which kind of touched on stuff like, old school movies and great TV shows and basically media, you'll enjoy the 90s kids movie stream as well. So stay tuned for that. It's coming soon. But as far as tonight's stream, that's all I have for you guys, and I really appreciate your time. Till next time, that's it for me. See y'all later. Thanks so much. This thing never ends.